So what we're going to take a look at next is adding a Dropzone into our photo upload widget, and by far and away the most popular one to use for doing this sort of thing is a package called React Dropzone. It's well maintained, the documentation is excellent, and it's even been updated to use React hooks. And under the hood, the library makes use of hooks, so whichever method of using this, and there are options, then you need to be on at least React 16.8, which we are, so that's fine. And what we'll do is we'll just copy all of this into the clipboard. We'll npm install React Dropzone, and then we'll just create a component and paste this stuff in there and then take a look at it. So let's head back to VS Code, and I'm just going to open up the terminal. I've got a warning about the login form that I removed earlier, but I will ignore that for now and open up a new terminal. And super important, we cd into our client app so that we don't try and install something at the solution level. And we'll do npm install react-dropzone and press return. And once this is added, let's go and add a new component for this. And inside the photo upload, inside the common folder, let's create a new file and call it photo widgets dropzone.tsx. And I'm just going to paste in the contents of my clipboard that we got from the documentation for Dropzone. And I'm just going to make a few small changes to this to make it consistent with our other components. This is just using a function rather than the arrow function that we've been using throughout this course. So I'm just going to change this to use a const and call it photo widgets dropzone and add the arrow function. And I'm just going to add an export and say export defaults photo widgets dropzone. So let's take a look at what we've got here inside our photo widget dropzone. And first of all, we've got a function that's used when we drop an image into our dropzone. And our dropzone is inside this input. And at the moment, there's not a lot in the way of styling. It's just two paragraphs. One will be active when we're hovering over this dropzone with a file. And what we have here is a React hook called useDropZone that takes in our onDrop as a parameter. And what we also get out of this useDropZone hook is the root props, the input props, and a property to notify if the drag is active, and we can use this for styling. So first of all, let's see what happens when we do drop a file in here. And what we can use is inside this use callback is we'll just add a console.log and we'll pass in the accepted files, which is what this uses as our parameter. When we drop a file over, then this method is called and we'll take a look at what we get inside the accepted files. And what we'll do is we'll just add this to our photo upload widget, and we'll just add it underneath our first header, and we'll use the photo widget dropzone. And if we go back to our browser and take a look, and we can see our component there, it obviously needs some styling, but it will serve its purpose for now. And I'm just going to open up the console and go into the console. And then I'm just going to open up Finder. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop an image into the drop zone, and we can see that the text changes as I hover over. And I'll just drop the image there, and we can see inside the console we've got an array of the files that we've dropped there. Now we can drop multiple files into this particular component, but we're only going to let the user drop one file at a time because we want them to be able to resize this image and then preview and upload. And what this file object contains is the file properties when it was last modified, the name, the path, the type of file that it is. But what this doesn't come with is an image preview. And we want to be able to preview what we've dropped into the drop zone. But what we can do with a file that we drop inside here that is an image is we can create a preview of the image from what we've dropped in. And let's do that. Let's create a preview of this image so that we can display it in our preview and upload area. And what we need to do that is let's go back to our photo widget Dropzone. And what we want to do is we want to store the files, or file in this case, that we get in here in our local state, but we want to store that in our photo upload widget itself. So what we can do, and we'll need to change this into curly brackets actually and add a return so that we can add additional statements in here. So I'll say return, and then I'll just cut the JSX and just paste that after the return and just reformat. And then we can use whatever statements we want and functions we want above what we're returning. And what we want here is some local state. So I'll say const, and I'll say files, and set files equals use state, and I'll just set this to be an empty array. And we get some complaints because we need to import this, so I'll import use state, and that removes the complaints. And what we can do is pass this method down to React Dropzone. So I'll say set files equals set files. And in our Dropzone, we'll need to add an interface to take the props. So I'll say interface iProps, and we'll say set files, and this is going to take the files, which is going to be a type of object array, and it's going to return void. And then we can add the components, so we'll say react.fc and pass in our iProps, and then we can just destructure the setFiles method. So what we want to do to be able to create a preview of what we're doing here is use setFiles. And what we want to do is take our accepted files, map over them, and then what we'll use is object assign so that we can assign a preview property to each file that's in this array. Now there's only ever going to be one file inside this accepted files array, but that's fine. And what we'll do is we'll say accepted files dot map, and then we'll take each file, which is going to be of type object, and then we'll use the object.assign method, and the target is going to be the file, and then what we can do is add a comma and add some curly brackets, and then we can set a new property on the file, and we can say url.createObjectURL and pass in the file, and this will allow us to use a preview of the image. And I don't need that semicolon there. And then what we can do is go back to our photo upload widgets, and inside the preview and upload we can add an image, and let's bring in the image from Semantic UI. And we can set the source of the image equal to the files, and we'll specify the index of 0 and preview, and that needs to be lowercase. And we're getting all sorts of errors and warnings here as well due to type differences, and what I'm going to do is, just to get around these warnings, is the type of set state action we've got is never array. And it's telling us that we can't use this to set our files. So what I'm going to do to get around this, and this is a get around this kind of thing, is to use any array. And remember, any is always just going to bypass any type checking, and it's just really treating this component as though it's JavaScript rather than TypeScript. And then what I want to do is make sure that we've got some files in our files array before we display this, or attempt to display this preview of the file we've just dropped in there. So I'm going to say files.length is greater than 0, and then just take the curly brackets and place it after our image and just reformat things there. And based on what we've done there, what we should see now is that when we drop an image into the drop zone, we're going to see the preview of that image inside our preview area. And let's just make sure everything looks good inside here, and it does. We'll take a look at the styling of this in the next lesson, but for now let's just make sure we can do the most simple thing. And I'll get my images again, and once again I'll drop the image into the drop zone, and this time we see the image in our preview area. Woohoo! So next up we'll add some styling to this.